What is going on, my homies, and welcome to the Monster Bass channel. I got a little piece of juice for you. We're going to talk today about one of my favorite techniques, and that's flipping, and more specifically punching. It's something I absolutely love to do. And in Florida, where I'm from, we do it all year round. It's really hand-to-hand combat fishing. It's close quarters. You're focusing on very visual cues, very visual structures and cover. And it's just fun. It's very analytical, and it's very picking things apart, which I really enjoy. Sometimes they can be on the tip of something. Sometimes they're sort of like in the middle, and it's all about where you drop that bait, because bait placement is huge, because you're not really casting and covering a lot of water. You're really placing your bait exactly where you think that fish is sitting and trying to get a reaction bite. So let's talk about what you're going to look for. The main focus that I look for, especially during these warmer months as we go into summer and then fall is absolutely killer, is matted vegetation. And that's very general. Hydrilla is ideal, matted hydrilla, floating style mats like pennywort and hyacinth, ideal, but that stuff's not all over the place, right? So if you have a lake that doesn't have that kind of cover, maybe it has milfoil. Milfoil does the same thing. Junk mats, maybe you have a lot of floating debris or floating grass, lily pads all stacked up and kind of matted together, blown into a corner. Anything that creates something that has a canopy, basically kind of a roof over their heads, an umbrella for that sunlight, something to create some shade. And they like that for two reasons. One, it's a great piece of cover. They can jump out of there, or within that cover actually ambush like prey, bluegill, especially bluegills, shad, little minnows, frogs, all those kinds of things. But then it also provides shade for those bass because they want to get out of the sun, just like the same reason why they use docks and other overhead cover. That grass and that canopied matted grass acts in the same manner. So it's just that way to get those fish out of the sun. They have no eyelids. They can't close their eyes and be like, oh, it's so bright. They're like, hey, I gotta go in the mat, bro. And that's where we can catch them. So let's talk setups. Setups are really gonna vary based upon where you fish, just like the vegetation. The general setup though, right here, I have a Halo. This is a 7.6 heavy. I don't like extra heavy. I don't like medium heavy. I kind of like heavy for just about everything that I do when it comes to flipping. The reason being, a lot of times you're not going to get these fish all the way to the boat. You're going to get that bite, you're going to set the hook, and they're going to get stuck because it's so nasty, it's so thick, it's so gooey, and you really don't want a rod that's overly stiff that will pull the hook out of them. You basically want to get them pinned and be like, dude, let's see how well my trolling motor works, and then gun on in there and get that fish out. 7.6 heavy is really a good all-around rod. I'll use this anywhere from a 3/8 all the way up to a 1.25 ounce punching weight. Like we talked about earlier, it's very close quarters fishing, so a lot of times, there's like a giant tree behind me right there. A lot of times you're like up on that tree and you need to drop it in between a few branches because there's a little mat of grass, or you're up on a big mat of grass and you want to just kind of plunk it very accurately. It's long enough to give you some leverage on the fish, but short enough where you can be ultimately accurate. Now, I will tell you this, when I'm doing strictly mat fishing, like with a 1.5, with a 2 ounce, with a 1.75, even over 2 ounce, that's when I'll go to a longer rod. I have a 711, once again a heavy action rod. It has a nice tip to it, but what I find with that longer rod, it makes that big weight a lot more manageable. It also allows you to sort of lift and feel that bite better. A lot of times under some of these really thick mats, feeling for that bite is more about just feeling kind of like dead weight. You'll be kind of yo-yoing it, and all of a sudden you'll just be like, man, am I stuck on grass or do I have a bite? And the rod really does the work for you. You can have that rod kind of, that extra little length gives it a little bit more tip, and it allows you to kind of feel those dead weight bites a little bit better. So in general, weights wise, if you're flipping matted vegetation, I would look at anywhere from 3/4, that's on the extreme low end of the spectrum. Really, you probably want to start more around 1 ounce to 1.5 ounce. Use tungsten. Tungsten is the best choice for all of this. It's more compact. I'll go all the way up to a 2 ounce, but my juice is really a 1.7 or a 1.5. The 1.75 is sort of my alternative. The other thing that I would highly recommend you do, like we said, this is close quarters, heavy duty fishing. Always put 2 bobber stoppers in front of your weight. Why do you do that? It's real simple. There's no magic to it. It's simply a utility move. A lot of times you're going to be pitching into reeds, into pads, around grass, around all kinds of junk, and you're using heavy braid. So heavy braid is almost like a saw. So not only does it saw through the vegetation, it saws through those bobber stoppers, and basically you can go through a day, you're flipping for 6 hours, you're exhausted, and you look down at your rod and your bobber stopper's gone because you only put one on. But if you put two on, you got sort of like a little insurance policy. You know, you can keep on working through the day, and when you get back to the house, you're relaxing in the garage, re-rigging for the next day, you can put two back on there. It just allows you to be more fluid. A lot of this bite is about getting in the zone, getting sort of that rhythm, figuring out how many lifts on the bait you're going to do, figuring out how fast you want to present it. It's really a rhythm kind of in the zone, in the classic sports sort of metaphor kind of fishing. So let's talk about line. In general, you're going to be running braid. It's heavy cover fishing. It's grass fishing for the most part. There are exceptions though. I will run fluorocarbon. It's usually 18 to 25 pound, and that's for when I'm going around stuff. And one of my favorite baits for doing that is this guy. It's a Gambler Ace, just a stick bait, super all-purpose utility bait, and that's basically when I'm pitching sort of for that glide bite. I'm pitching around pads, I'm pitching around grass, I'm pitching strands of grass that are kind of out in maybe a creek channel or a little deeper water. However, when you start getting into that super heavy stuff, unless the bite is super tough or unless the lake you're fishing is highly pressured, you need to go to the braid. And the reason for that is you might get a few less bites, but you're going to land more fish. Braid wise, I'd look at 50 if you're in fairly sparse stuff, but really the juice that everybody uses is 65. I actually use a little different approach. I use what's called Daiwa Samurai braid. It's a waxy style braid. The reason I do, it's a little quieter. A lot of times I'm yo-yoing the bait under the mats, and it doesn't have that sawing sound that your more traditional Power Pro and standard braids get when you're actually fishing around that vegetation. However, when I'm using those waxier braids, they tend to nick up and break when you get those nicks if you're fishing around heavier cover. So I actually go up to 80, but it is a lower diameter line. So anywhere 50 to 80, depending on the heaviness of cover, you kind of got to figure it out for your style lake. The other big trick with your setup, and you can do this on fluorocarbon, it's very hard to tie, but as you can see, I got a little boxer craw on here, and it's a straight shank hook. So I actually have that hook snelled. We'll rip this boxer craw off, and the reason for that is what it ends up doing is it kicks that hook out. So basically, along with the braid, that low stretch line, I don't really need to set the hook that hard. I can just kind of lean into them. You know, I still put it to them pretty good because I want to get them coming out of the cover, but I highly recommend using a straight shank, pretty heavy gauge hook. You can see that's a pretty stout hook right there, and then using that snell knot really allows you to have better hookups, especially with those dead weight or those very funky bite fish. The last thing is the age-old question: craw versus creature. Now, we talked about the stick bait. The stick bait I'll use around cover and sometimes punching through some very, very tight vegetation where I don't want sort of kicker or appendages. But the reality is a lot of this, what we're doing is in summer, so you want more of a waving sort of appendage action. The fish are more active, you want to displace more water, and it's really about that glide and that fall. So really the stick bait is my around cover, and then if the fish are in a super funky mood. But what I usually do is this. My concept is I'll start with a creature style bait, just like this Gambler Stinger right here. Has nice kind of flapping appendages, has a brim style body, because usually that's what's up in this grass is a lot of bluegill, a lot of brim, shellcracker, things along those lines. Even frogs, kind of looks like a frog. So it mimics that. It's a little bigger bait, and because of the diameter, that's what's kind of cool with these creature baits is they're thinner, so they actually slide through pretty well. However, there's some days in summer, those light cold fronts that you get, the fish get in a funky mood, or you're flipping some extra heavy duty stuff, like super gooey, super thick stuff. That's usually when I go down to a craw. Either when the pressure's up, the fish aren't biting very well. Craws are usually downsized. This boxer craw is kind of like a compact style craw. Has kicking appendages, but a little bit different, little boxing glove type things, but the reality is it's more compact. So if I put this on a 1.5 ounce and I put this on a 1.5 ounce, I'm going to get through the mat more times with that Craw, just because it's more compact and it's easier to slide through the mat. So you got to think about fish activity level, what they're doing, what kind of the state of your fishing impoundment, your fishing lake is, but then also think about the cover that you're fishing. What's the most efficient, easy way to get through and make drops? Because in the end, it's a game of numbers. It's all about making drops. The more drops you make, the more bites you get. Now that we just talked about flipping, pitching, and punching, I'm going to go flipping, pitching, and punching because I can't talk about it and not do it. So hit that like and subscribe button for Monster Bass. And if you want to, go check out my channel, Mikey Balzz Fishing. We do a little bit of flipping, pitching, and punching. It's one of my favorite techniques, but go try it. It's one-on-one, hyper intense, hyper cover, super heavy duty, braided line kind of fishing. It's all the best things of bass fishing combined in one. So give it a try. Drop your comments below if you have anything to add to this video. We'll see you out on the water, boys. Tight lines.